All right, everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Stephen D. Kelly, and this is the Stephen D. Kelly Show, and we are Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. And it is May 29th, 2025, the day after my birthday, which I'm not really going to talk about. I made my bitch and moan bullshit. You guys hear how angry I am and all that. But, here it is. And I'll just say this. Source is a wonderful thing. I hope all you guys are listening because this stuff I'm going to be talking about is important. But Source has a way of letting me know what I need to talk about and pointing me in the right direction and giving me the message. But I think ultimately, before I try to dive into this, I want to tell you guys that you may not appreciate. Those of you that are already involved in the group probably do, but the casual listener to this recording or anyone that might be casually joining the group at any given time, you're never going to understand the significance of what we're doing, let alone the information and truth that we're providing. And one of these things that's really significant that I kind of take for granted, and yet people still ask questions about it and they debate the various details, the mechanics, and the nature thereof, and that is the nature of the Trinity. And ultimately, I guess that would mean the nature of God, Source, the Creator, the nature of Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Now, this has been one of the greatest questions in humanity since, I don't know, forever recorded time, not the least of which in the last 2,000 years, before, during, and after Christ. Well, actually, obviously, people didn't talk about the nature of Christ. We're talking about Christian questions. But these things have never gone away. And if you listen to me tonight and try to understand what I'm going to give you, you might be able to comprehend some of the grander pictures of things you were probably confused about, not the least of which are, Ukraine, Syria, the Middle East, things that are going today, and the motives and questions and all that. And ultimately, of course, this ties to the Getty, Magna Carta, and all these issues, Nazis, all this stuff, and Jews, of course. But tonight, instead of poking fingers at the Pharisees and what have you and their damage, we're going to be looking a little more closer at things like the Crusades, and notwithstanding the influence of the Pharisees and those types on the Crusades, but a little bit more on the what people like refer to as the black nobility, those Italian royal families, those mysterious Italian royal families, and people say, yes, they still control the world, them and the Vatican and blah, 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 and all this. Well, you need to understand, we're going to talk about it, what this stuff is all about, and how everything that's going on now, wow, you should see a squirrel going on this wire. He's like upside down right now. It's like, how cute. Anyway, so just to preface all this, I was having a conversation with somebody, a lovely conversation. We were talking about history, or I was doing my best to try to express my feelings about certain things. And we were talking about Zionism, the birth of Zionism, Bolshevism, these kind of things. And I got into, Khazars, Vikings, Russia, all this stuff. But, ultimately it led to the question, because obviously this is the whole nature of Zionism. And, this is even after I explained the sparsity that is the concept of a nation built on a religion or a religion based on a nation or vice versa, whatever concocted recipe you want to do. I'm not here to address that tonight. But what happened is that when I was asked the question, well, shouldn't the Jews have a homeland? And I thought, wow, obviously I mean, my first answer is no. I mean, religion, homeland, whatever, no, that's ridiculous. And that's without quantifying or looking at the value or how long it's been there or, geography or the real blood connections or anything. Throw that all aside. What I wanted to do was try to think, well, wait a second, when have we had a similar situation where we've had a society or a kingdom, if you will, that came with its own belief system or became its own belief system that made such a claim? Now, one of the big things that I think is obviously really important that everyone needs to remember are the Phoenicians. Because, when I think of destroyed societies, I mean, hell, the Phoenicians, they were there from 6,000 BC and they got wiped out. I mean, the city of Tyre got wiped out. Lebanon, whatever was left of them there, got wiped out. This spanned the centuries. And then there's Carthage, which nobody talks about. That place where they had large municipal gatherings that involved the murder and subsequent burning of children, which was a very big feature in both sides of Israel, Judah and Israel, after the death of King Solomon and before. It happened. Obviously, let's just, for the sake of not being rude, we'll just say us those damn Phoenicians and their influence, and this is what Solomon was running with. But either way, it's a bloodthirsty thing, and civilization scattered. People from that were taken over by Assyria scattered, and there's a lot of history there. And I don't really want to talk about those, but unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about Turkic nations and all the various Caucasus, Kyrgyzstan, all these areas that were basically based on that, along with Asiatic societies. It might have been displaced by the Tang dynasty or otherwise known as Mongolians, Genghis Khan, Cognates, whatever you want to call it, Khazaria. It was a fun little mixture of these pagan polydeity things that adopted the Israeli faith, if you will, the made up Khazaria. But I'm not here to talk about that. But when I was thinking about this Israeli homeland for the Israelites, and I had to come up with another country, I thought, gee, what another country that I would like to see given back its homeland. And I couldn't help but thinking of, what was the name of that? Trebizond. Trebozon, I think it is. Or A-B-O, anyway, Trebizond. The romantic kingdom of Trebizond that nobody talks about, knows about, and there's only fairy tales about how wonderful it was before it was conquered by whoever it was, the Ottoman Turks, I guess. Where is Trebizond? What did it come from? You know what? It was Christian, but then where did it come from? You know where it came from? Another romantic city that was destroyed that I also miss and long for and would like to talk about tonight, and that is Constantinople, otherwise known as what? Istanbul? No, Istanbul? Yeah, Constantinople. Really, really important. Now here's the thing. Aside from talking about the Romans and the Roman empires and what they did, hang on. I'll say this for the Romans. In order to help their empire be somewhat homogeneous and to assimilate after they have gathered all these various tribes and peoples from all these geographic areas that spanned, the Mediterranean, the civilized world, and up. One of the things that they did was they tolerated a lot of religions. They tolerated a lot of practices. They had to. They had to do that in order to keep the peace, just like they did with the Greeks. One of the things they did was they assimilated a lot of the Greek stuff because it was convenient. Okay? It was convenient. They worked that into their systems, much the way the Constantine and the Catholics did the same thing with the pagan holidays and the Roman and the Greek and what have you, and all this stuff, everything that permeates the entire, every little aspect of our society. Now, I always kind of didn't really think too great of Constantine. I thought, okay, this is the emperor that decided to adopt Christianity and make it the official religion of Rome, and that Subsequently, this allowed him to take control and infiltrate and all these things, which is true. But a lot of other things happened. Now, you have to remember, this didn't even happen until something like 250 AD. A lot had gone on, and at the very least of which the apostles by this time were all dead. And they had scattered all over the known worlds at the time and set up churches everywhere. Many of them were Gnostic, which is very, very important. Now, I had some questions that I presented to Grok today. And the first question was, I wanted to know the similarities and the differences and everything else connected to the Gnostics, the early Gnostics, and the Eastern or the Greek Orthodox Church. Well, here's the thing. I suppose the reason why is because I'm looking for connections between the Gnostics and what's going on today with Russia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't realize how bad it was. But first thing I found out, main difference between the two, if I have to paraphrase in a nutshell, is that the Gnostics believed in a system, and I could get this wrong, and I apologize if I do, but it was kind of a dualist system, which believed that there was God, the creator, the ultimate source creator, and then there was a lesser creator or a demiurge that was actually responsible for the creation of the material world. The world's everything below the top three levels. Now, as I told you in my group, it's not uncommon for me to talk to you about densities. And I made a comment just the other day, and I said, and I'm going to paraphrase and probably add to what my original statement was. But the point is that the world is never going to know peace. It's never going to know paradise. We're never going to move forward until the world, all of humanity, becomes aware of and accepts the concepts of density. Because obviously, it would seem that this knowledge, the mechanics of the universe that I have tried so much to lay out for you in an understandable way, and I think that those of you in my group that have heard me talk about density have a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about, and you know the level. And this is why I kind of trip when you ask me, well, who's on top, Jesus or the Holy Spirit or whatever? Okay, we're talking about the matrix here. It's not your job to know these things. However, according to the Gnostics, it was Source. And Source created the Holy Spirit. And as has been described to me, and as my understanding is, the Holy Spirit was actually multiple entities combined into groups of entities, each one a single entity. But it was the combination of these entities, the lust, the creation, the intercourse of these entities that produced all lower levels of creation. And subsequently, it was one of these characters that tried to rise above and to know Source, broke the rules and was cast down. And this was Sophia, as we said, according to all sorts of different legends. Similar, of course, in some ways to the Lilith story in Adam and Eve. But ultimately, biblically speaking, this was creation. This was a necessary event that was necessary to cause everything to start from level 1 up to level 9. Actually, level 9 and level 8 were already there. But the bottom line is, and I'll say this briefly before I get into the historical stuff, but as a Jedi, what I preach to my group is that Jesus is our commander, but Jesus is also our liaison to Source. But our power, our abilities, by the will of Jesus, from Source, at the will of Source, come from the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is actually above Jesus. And that doesn't mean that there's some authoritative construct, because obviously these stupid humans throughout time have tried to assign authority to what they don't understand, some human BS chain of command authority system. Heaven does not work that way. Heaven isn't even in the top three, the reality of the Trinity, which is the domain of time. Heaven and hell and the realm of the angels, 4, 5, and 6, is below the Trinity. That's the domain of energy. We, rocks, plants, animals, and humans, are in the bottom three. 1, 2, 3. We are the domain of matter, compressed energy, which is compressed time. That is the nature of God. You don't need to know anymore. And these stupid humans throughout time that have waged war over this information are retarded. And isn't it interesting that here we are ready to wrestle and destroy a control structure system that's been in place on this planet for 25 million years. And one of the key aspects of accomplishing this is giving to you and making known this important mechanical information of how the universe works, including the nature of your creator. And when everybody bitches about the divinity of Jesus and the chasm between source and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, or what they say is the Holy Spirit, it's all God. It's all source. It all works down and it all will return to source. And you could go to the lowest pits of hell and they will still return back to source, because all creation is source and everything returns to source. And all this stupid crap and arguing is fucking human retardation. But I want to talk about the Eastern religions a little bit. Because, as I said, the apostles, they spread out everywhere and they spread their version of what they believed. And a lot of it, I believe, is extremely accurate. But when Constantine came along, he was just a regular guy. He was a fighter, a legionnaire, a general. Don't remember exactly where he was born. I'm sure it was somewhere in the Middle East, but he ended up as far away as, I think, Britain, UK, fighting against various different enemies of the empire at the time. And eventually he defeated two other contenders for control of Rome at the time, and he became a Caesar Augustus himself. But he promptly moved the capital of Rome to Constantinople. Now on the surface, this makes a lot of. He created Constantinople. Obviously, it's named after Constantine. The Hagia Sophia that's his place. Anyway, so many different things. Now back in those days, Constantine, he basically made the church, Christianity, the official religion of Rome, and he wanted to control the power structure. And basically what this meant was he needed to consolidate all the various versions of what was considered Christianity. So he called for the Council of Nicaea, which was a portion of area along the Black Sea, I believe, probably very close to Trebizond. Anyway, it's interesting because during the Council of Nicaea, it was decided that everybody would agree on certain key aspects of the divinity of Jesus and where the Holy Spirit fit into the picture and where Jesus came from and whether or not Source God created Jesus, or was Jesus there eternal just like Source God was eternal. Obviously, I don't believe that. Come on. But it's irrelevant because ultimately, like I said, everything is source. And if you believe, like I do, that Jesus is on level 7, which is where all the ascended masters are, and he's waiting for us to all graduate to heaven, and then from there graduate up to the higher levels, and we all go back to source, the opposite of the Big Bang. That's millions and millions and millions and millions of years away, but that's what I believe. But here's the thing. That's the funny thing about the Council of Nicaea is that there were two basic doctrines, of course. And we're not even talking about the whole concept of the demiurge at this point. We're talking about whether or not Jesus came after Source or Jesus was eternal with Source. And between Source and Jesus, they created the Holy Spirit, this kind of thing, as opposed to Source creating the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit creating Jesus, which is a variation of what the Gnostics believe. Well, they have all sorts of variations involving Sophia. But what the Council of Nicaea basically did was declared all this other stuff heresy. And you'll, if you pay attention to the history, you'll see that there's all sorts of little variations of Christianity in the world at that time. And they all were based on different little minute interpretations of what we're talking about now, the divinity and the nature of Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, and Source and God, etc., the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Stupid stuff to be arguing about. But whole religions were based on these little variations of this stuff. But anyway, the point is the Council of Nicaea, one of the sides that lost the battle of the Council of Nicaea was the same people that inspired Constantine to become Christian. Funny enough. Either way, Constantinople was the capital of the Roman Empire for a good time until the big split between other segments, people in the West, people in the East, and the guys in the Roman, or the, probably the black nobility types, the Venetians, whatever you want to call them, whatever. I don't pay attention to these people, but anyway, I suspect that those people that thought that all power should be in Rome and not in Constantinople were the ones responsible for this. But either way, hundreds of years went by, hundreds of years. And the differences between the Western Roman and the Eastern Roman were pretty pronounced. And they were all based on these questions about the nature of Jesus, etc., and other details. One of the things that's kind of significant about the Eastern Orthodox religion, Greek Orthodox, is that the priests can have wives, which I think is very interesting considering that nowadays there's a swelling and explosion of people wanting to join the Roman version, not the Roman, but the Russian Orthodox Church, which is the true successor of Constantine III in Rome. And that's known as a very manly religion. You should see some of their priests, they're studs. Well, hey, testosterone is a powerful thing. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, without pointing fingers, because we know who I am ultimately pointing fingers at, Turkic peoples, if you will, call them whatever, very different persuasions, people who were released from the various different captivities in Babylon and Syria, but they pollute everything, including the Roman Empire and everything else. Now, what happened? The Crusades happened. Remember the first Crusades when they started the ill-fated children's crusade that went so far as like Frankfurt and killed a whole bunch of Jews in Frankfurt and forced them to commit to Christianity? People like Donald Trump's family. Anyway, the Byzantines, the so-called brothers in Catholicism, the Eastern version of Catholicism, needed help, wanted help. Constantinople was a very powerful area, and they wanted help. They asked for help. Their Roman Western brethren. And this was what caused the launch of the Fourth Crusade, which ultimately, of course, was supposedly to help, was it? I think it was Baldwin was the guy that did this, Fourth Crusade, Baldwin #1. But anyway, like the bastards they are, these were mostly Venetians. They basically if I may be so rude, and say they fucked over their Christian brothers. Fuck them over. Talking, we're talking Templars now. People like to use this euphemistic thing. They go, oh, the Crusades. The Crusades did it. No, it was the Templars. You know what the Templars are. We're still dealing with them today under the Getty. Yes, this is a story about the people under the Getty and what they did. So what did they do? They sacked Byzantium. They sacked it. They sacked Constantinople, one of the great wonders of the world, the capital of the Roman Empire, before it was split in two, with all the treasures that you would expect to be in the capital of the Roman Empire. Great manuscripts, wealth of knowledge, statues, bronze, whatever. Magnificent palaces, of which we can still see, only now it's got minarets. Anyway, point is when those so-called Christian Templars went in there and sacked the city, remember, they were supposed to be helping them defend against the, heathens, the whatever, the Arabs, the Suleimans of the world. What did they do? They shit in their holy books. They destroyed everything. They killed everybody. They destroyed everything. They took the treasure. Much of it they shipped back to Venice because, of course, this was paid for by the greedy Venetian merchants who wanted to, A, sack the place and take all the money, and B, bring the power from the east back to the west and consolidate all this crap. Now, what caused this big schism in the first place between the east and the west and the Greek Orthodox and the Roman Catholics? What was the great schism? It was Charlemagne. Remember Charlemagne? I keep talking about Charlemagne and how all this bullshit we're going through today is connected to Charlemagne. This is what caused the great schism. Because why? Because Charlemagne, not only did he try to seek control of everything and say that he was in charge of the East and the West, which he says, wait a minute, bullshit. We're not believing in this papacy controlling everything crap, because what was the papacy back then? Corrupt Venetians elected by other corrupt Venetians. If you go in the Getty, you're going to see big fancy paintings of these corrupt Venetians. Is it still corrupt today? Of course it is. It's the same system. They were signers to the Magna Carta. You know who was not signers to the Magna Carta? Russia. The Eastern Orthodox Church was not included. They are not part of this big satanic mafia that we deal with. You know who is? The Vatican. Is the Vatican controlled by wealthy families like the Orsini's, etc., the black nobility? Well, of course they are. But what does that even mean? Because Charlemagne is German. The Holy Roman Empire was German, not Italian. Anyway, I'm not going to waste too much time on this. I'm going to go pretty quick. But when it was sacked, it never really recovered. I mean, it continued, but it wasn't completely destroyed, but it never recovered. It was extremely weak. And 200 years later, the Ottoman Empire came along and destroyed it. The wonderful Ottoman Empire. You know, those guys that gave us the Armenian genocide. They also gave us Jacob Frank. They gave us the Illuminati. They gave us the Khazarian Mafia. They gave us all this shit. They gave us World War I. They gave us World War II. These peoples, without naming names. Where do they come from? This mixture of refugees of Solomon and refugees of Genghis Khan and the various different local peoples that got together and mixed all their shit together. And what did they have in common? Human sacrifice. And yet somehow, just like their connection to the Phoenicians, they think they need to control the world. You know where most of this activity happened? In fucking Ukraine. The same battlefields we see being fought over today have been ancient battlefields since like forever, at least as far as our recorded history goes. Hell, the kingdom of Trebizond that I was telling you about, that was located on the southern shores of the Black Sea and, you know, a little area around there, they also had a presence in Crimea. Go figure. Go figure. You know, that whole area, the Kerch Bridge and all that, that was Trebizond. Go figure. That was Christian. Christian. They were leftovers from the Christians that fell during the time of Constantinople. 3 different kingdoms were set up, one of which they were. There was also a Nicene kingdom that was set up, interestingly enough. But anyway, the point is, if those fucking crusaders had not gone in there and done what they did, because of the greed of the Venetian merchants and the desire for the, you know, the legacy of Charlemagne to maintain entire control over the entire, well, everything surrounding the Mediterranean, none of this horrible shit would have happened. All because they want to argue about the nature and the divinity of Christ. You know, if you can't have an open mind, you're screwed. You know, I'll tell you, it occurred to me, I thought about it, and I go, well, you know, ultimately this is all about control. Obviously, Charlemagne wanted control. Constantine wanted control. Genghis Khan wanted control. They all want control. I want control. Who's ever in control determines what you're all going to accept as reality. In this case, this reality that we're talking about is nothing less than the secrets of the universe and the mechanics of how it works. And for all these years, you have been lied to. Just like the blind man feeling the elephant, describing various different parts of the elephant, and then they all go to war with each other and kill each other because one thinks the tail is God and the other one thinks the trunk is God, etc., etc., etc. And everybody's stupid because, like I try to tell you all so many times, you can't comprehend the nature of it all, any of it. But what you can do is understand what I've given you and understand that it's very simple. It's ratios of the spiritual, which is the non-physical, and the physical. I want to call that a polarity, so be it. You don't need to understand all the rest. You don't need to understand the connection between God and gravity and the electromagnetic spectrum and scalar and all that stuff. You don't need to. Again, as I've said to so many of you, so much. Pull your hands and arms inside the boat. Stop trying to row the boat. Stop trying to steer the boat. Sit back and relax and go where the flow takes you. You know where you're going. You know how this works. And I'm not telling you to be lazy and not try to be productive and get other people to join us in this boat. Yes. But in order for us all to reach paradise, you don't need to understand all the details. It's not important. You never will, because all you're going to do is end up arguing over Who's right? I'll make it simple for you. I'm right. Okay? You know, there's a reason why I'm the only person on earth that's come along after all these years and said, hey, this is how we end it all right here, this one little spot, change the entire earth. Oh, and while you're at it, this is how the system works. This is where you sit on the grand totem pole of reality. You know, once you get past all the BS, it's all pretty simple. And really, all you have to know is service to others. That's all you have to know. This great mystery of the universe, serve others. You were born for this job and this mission and to help others reach salvation, reach paradise, and this is how we do it. You know, because we're not going away. This information's not going away. And nobody has a better message. Nobody knows better than we do because it's all very simple. We've cut through the bullshit and we've learned to ignore the lies, such as the nature of reality. Wormholes. Anyway, people. Like I said, I still mourn over the loss of the kingdom of, well, I want to say kingdom, but the city of Constantinople. I can never forgive those people that conquered it. You know, when the Crusaders came in there the first time and sacked the city, they took so much of the great treasures of the city, statues, things like that, and they sold them for scrap metal. They melted them down, like so many other great, grand treasures of the world, wonders of the world, if you will. You know, one of the most glaring examples of this is there's a set of horses, I believe, over at, I think it's St. Mark's in Venice, bronze horses. So they were sacked from Constantinople. I'm not exactly, oh, yeah, the Hippodrome that they destroyed. So it wasn't just the seat of all Christianity that had lost a fight against those that would take control. The guys in the West, the guys that claim heritage from St. Peter, those guys. It was the crushing and destruction of the Roman culture. They didn't just destroy the Eastern Christian Orthodox culture, they destroyed the Roman culture. What did they put in its place? Let's see. The Greeks, Orthodox, they used a lot of Greek. The guys that took over, they used a lot of Latin. That was probably the biggest thing that they did differently. But they basically called everyone else madmen, heretics, schismatics, apostates, crucify them, horrible things. No open mind, no debate. They're all wrong. And this fight has not stopped. And the fact that Russia has assumed the mantle, the third Roman Empire, that's completely legit because the second Roman Empire was destroyed by the people that claim to be the holy controllers of our Christian faith. They destroyed it. The city set up by Constantine, the man who decided to make Christianity the official religion of the empire. I'd say that makes Constantine look good. As far as these bishops and popes and various people that came along, fuck them. Fuck them all. I'm sorry. But you know, in the East, they don't believe that stuff. They don't believe that salvation comes from following the rules, doing whatever the person in Rome says, taking the sacraments. No, they believe that salvation comes from knowledge, which is also esoteric, which happens to be what Jesus tried to teach us. I mean, obviously, if you want to follow the footsteps of Jesus and heal as he did, follow in his footsteps, do as he said to do better than him, you need to follow the esoteric. That's the way it is. You need to build yourself, and you don't submit to the authority of some man with a ring and a funny hat. That's not Jesus. This so called Holy Father, sorry, he is not your Holy Father. He's just a man, an equal among equals. Because ultimately, we're all God. We're all brothers of Jesus. We're all sons of the Creator. Obviously, sons and daughters. Obviously, we don't give ourselves enough credit, and we don't need this metrical system telling us what's right and what's wrong. You don't need to go to church to have a conversation with Jesus. He's there for you all the time. He never went anywhere. It's his job, just like it's the job of the Holy Spirit to come down and do the work of the source, to God, the Creator, the Father. Just like it says in the Gospel of Thomas, that other schismatic doctrine that they despise, basically says that you can blaspheme the Father and you can blaspheme the Son. You can be forgiven, but you cannot blaspheme the Holy Spirit, because you will not be forgiven. There is no forgiveness. It's not the Holy Spirit's job to forgive you. And by the same token, it's the Holy Spirit who does the dirty work, if you will. When we do our business in the astral, it's the Holy Spirit that allows us to do what we do. We do so with the authority of Jesus, but it's the pure power of the Holy Spirit that allows us to destroy those lesser demons and to move effortlessly between densities when we do our work. It's not a matter of who's more important. It's not a linear thing. We know how it works, but it doesn't matter. But ultimately, we know it's circular, just like the Big Bang is circular. It's going to start at one point, it's going to go out, and it's going to come back. Just like infinity, it's a circle. Okay? It's not linear, it's circular. Anyway, people, I'm not going to go too much more than that. I hope this helped you. And I see we got a lot of listeners. I want to welcome everybody, especially if you're new to the show. And this is important stuff, because obviously the fight that's going on right now, who's the good guys and who's the bad guys? Well, you know who I'm rooting for. The side that wears the ribbon of St. George, the one that slayed the dragon, just like we're trying to do, and we do every night when the Jedi fight. We slay those demons. We follow in the footsteps of St. George. What better patron for the Jedi could we even think of than St. George? So in a way, you could say that we have a certain kinship with those people that are fighting the Satanists, the Nazis in Ukraine. And again, we're reminded that these battles in these very same fields have been going on for thousands of years, mostly over the same crap. They won't let it go. Just like I won't let go of the Getty mission. It's like that. Anyway, again, I want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight. And I want to remind you, if you want to help out, Yesterday was my birthday, and again, I'm over the depression and the rage right now. I'm back to trying to be productive and stuff, and go with the flow, and we're winning, and yeah, all that stuff. But if you want to help me out economically, which is always useful for whatever war chest and this and that, you can send something to my PayPal. It occurred to me, if I wanted tons and tons of money and I really wanted it, I could ask you guys, and I know you'd just give me whatever. I know a lot of you would. You'd bent over to just try to help me if it was something serious, and I appreciate that. And I know when it's not serious, it is what it is. And I keep telling people, you're wanting, you're wanting. You don't. It's not what you want. You get what you need, and I don't need, but at the same time, I'm not wanting, but any little love offering you send is highly appreciated. Okay. And if you want, it's obviously Stephen Kelly, 714 at yahoo.com. And that's an address for PayPal. And you got to say it's for friend or family and PayPal, or I will send it back. It doesn't happen too often, but I do it every once in a while. Anyway, again, you got to join the group, Telegram. Don't leave it, guys, if you haven't done that yet. I'm not going to get into politics, but my God, is Trump acting like a retard right now? Please, hello. He tried to say he was working out peace in Gaza. Give me a break. Fucking genocide. Just another genocide. That's why we got to hurry up and occupy the Getty and stop this shit. Anyway, again, join my Telegram group, which is Occupy the Getty /Stephen D. Kelly. And just a reminder, in case I didn't cover it during the show, all this Charlemagne crap, that is the EU. That is the royalists. That are the Nazis. That are the Templars. That is the people under the Getty. That is who they are. That is the so-called West. Okay? My enemies, my enemies' enemies are my friends. Anyway, guys, once again, thank you for joining me tonight. Recording came out halfway decent, looks like. We'll see what happens. I'll see you in the show, or in the group. If you want to email me, not send me money. If you want to email me, it's law17gun at AOL.com, LAW17GUN at AOL.com. And yes, I'm open for interviews. And if you know somebody that should be interviewing me, which is every person out there, tell them to do it. Okay? I appreciate all your work. All right, let me see if I got the sound queued up properly on this silly thing. Sure it'll work. Anyway, okay. Thank you guys for being here. And yeah, I love you all. Good night. God bless. Adios. And goodbye.